Hello everybody and welcome back to the campaign diary for my Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign, Aracséa edition. In this session, the party chat with a gossiping tiefling, almost get killed by a frost giant skeleton, and come face to face with a terrifying hag. A good session, some chatting, roleplay, and a lot of combat. Well, only two combats really, but both deadly for one of the party. One member of the party. But before we get into it, I do want to apologise to everyone for the time it's taken between this diary and the last. We've had some scheduling issues that's led to sessions coming weeks apart rather than like just 7 days. But nevertheless, we are back on track. We should have a game next week coming up. So yes, hopefully we'll be getting back into the swing of things. On to the session though, that side. So where did we leave off? We left off after having talked to Captain Indra and revealing that whole plot line. If you want to go back to the session 2 thing, you will find that there. So yes, they've literally just outside Captain Indra's lodge at the town hall, and they head to the White Lady Inn, a place that sits on the eastern edge of East Haven and overlooks the mists of the frozen Lake Lac-Dinashire. From here, they can also see like the abandoned East Haven ferry stuck within the ice of the docks. I'll put a map up or something so you can see. They've been told of a curfew that's been put into place on East Haven due to the recent disappearances, but the party nevertheless decide to walk along the docks to head to the Wet Trout, which is a place they've also been told of, to meet with to try and find a tiefling who has been called Hearsay by Captain Indra. They enter the Wet Trout Tavern, a place that is a lot rowdier than other places that they've walked by in East Haven, and it's predominantly occupied by dwarves, by Georga dwarves to be more precise. And as they enter, they everyone kind of quietens down, and they kind of look at them, and they keep shouting at them to put some money in a jar that's right next to the door, and the implication gets across that when the guards come by to check on them, they just basically bribe them and they let them get on with their way. So they all put in some coins into this jar, and the dwarves will go way, and then let them in and stuff like that. So yeah, they talk to the barkeep, and they notice that Stronus notices that he doesn't have any bangles on him, so he's a southern dwarf. He's a southerner from presumably somewhere from the south. And he calls himself Norbic Stormbrew, who is a somewhat artisan brewmaster, and they of course partake in his various brews and concoctions. Norbic Stormbrew was a massive nod to one of the characters who's in my other campaign, the Armin campaign, and he said to me after the session that his inner Armin, which is his character from Campaign 1, was just fuming because he's been looking for this guy for a while, and here he is in Campaign 2. Campaign 1.5. I'll get into that at a later date. Anyway, they have some drinks. They eventually find and talk to this Hearsay, who is a red-skinned tiefling dressed in somewhat ship captain / like a posh pirate rather, not pop pirate attire. They talk to him for nearly an hour, and they get some various rumours and stuff from the rumour tables that I've made and tales of him. They learn that he once ran the East Haven ferry and has been to many places beyond the Frostgales. He's been to a lot of places. And I basically inform of the opportunity that they could later exploit from Hearsay, which I forgot to mention as well before I got to that. His name is actually Heresy. It's just people just call him Hearsay because of his reputation, and it kind of sounds like heresy. But anyway, yeah, the opportunity I mentioned is basically using him. They can use him as an establishment from the Strongholds and Followers rulebook of Matthew Colville's fame, and it's for those who don't know, which I should imagine is a lot of people, it's sort of like they can hire him, they can give him money, and then he can go out and act as like a spy master, and he can go out and get some information, depending on how much money they give him and stuff like that. They can use him as a resource later on. Anyway, from there, I think some hints about the beast. Not much though, because they're not very specific in what they ask. So it's more or less just like a drinking thing and just a conversation. yeah, they head back to the inn, back to the White Lady Inn. They have a night's sleep, and then after that they head to the northeast coast to search for this beast, and the that has perhaps killed the 4 recent missing fishermen. Before I forget though, in the night, however, our ranger Mutiny, the frost tiefling, has a dream or like a vision. We're not quite sure which, or she isn't anyway. Nor am I, to be honest. I'm not sure if it is a vision or a dream. It's a mixture of both. What's the difference, really? Anyway, it involves her sight being shunted across the frozen lake and to in like an icy castle, and she has like a sight of a vision of a sword made of black crystalline ice, and that may sound familiar. It is, of course, a variation of the same vision she had when she was in Vindel Wildlands at the beginning of the game, before heading into the Frostgales. She didn't really do much with it, but I intend to bring it more forward in her story as we go. I may discuss like her proper backstory in a later video when it becomes more prominent. But anyway, she had that. She didn't really tell the guys about it. But that happened. I think one thing I do want to talk about is this idea of trying to bring out the roleplay in some players that aren't necessarily too focused on that kind of thing. Mutiny's player is very quiet in our game. She doesn't roleplay as much as the other two. She does every now and then when invited to, but she's mostly very quiet. Kind of just lets the other two do what they want and fill in all the RP gaps. So I've been thinking of just focusing on her story first and trying to let her say what's happening to her rather than me explain. So I'll bring her into our private Discord server, and then we'll do the stuff, and then when we return to the other guys, it will be her who has to do or like say what's happening. And I think I've got a few ideas that I'm going to chuck in to exacerbate her story and bring it to light first, rather than mingle with the other two's stuff, even though I have dropped hints of their stuff so far. But tell me what you think. Is that something you think you'd do if you had a player like that? Would you try and bring about, or would you just let them get on with it? It's interesting. I do hope she will fall more in line with the like role-playing thing. For me, it's a big part of the D&D. You want to create new characters and have all this kind of experience that you couldn't otherwise have. The whole fantasy thingamajig. But yeah, it'll be interesting to hear people's thoughts on that. So yeah, next they, like I said, they followed the northeast shore and continued to quest to find these 4 fishermen and the beast that stalks the shores. For those of you that have the Rime and Frostmaiden book, we are more or less looking at the Cauldron Caves section here of East Haven. But for those who don't, and to signify on some of my changes, after some time travelling, they find some tracks and they follow them to an abandoned rowboat. Inside the rowboat is a bunch of fishing supplies and tons of empty ale bottles. And this is all set beside like an icy cliffside to the east, and it has like 4 cave entrances, 3 higher up and 1 on the sea level, which has more of these humanoid tracks leading into them. There's also this strange moaning wind that seems to be like emanating from this area, and they try and discern if it's supernatural or natural, and they couldn't quite tell which. Not long after finding the rowboat, however, a direwolf leaps down from one of the caves, and it just immediately takes out Raina in one go. Basically, this giant wolf with bony spikes coming just leaps down, and I don't know, I was rolling really well this game in general, to be honest. I got a crit and she just went down. It just happened. It is what I guess. It's luck of the choice, and she went down. She wasn't dead, she was just, making death saves. So they then, after that shock, they then spent the next few rounds of combat killing the direwolf, bringing Bright Raina back, who I think had failed 2 death saves, so she was very close to like just ending right there. And then they have a brief discussion about, oh my god, that was pretty bad. They have a short rest, and they take an hour or 2 to recoup, and then decide to head on into the caves, the sea level cave that is. Upon entering, they see they see some like artist mannequins style statues. You know, like the little models that artists used for posing and stuff like that. They see like these kind of like statuettes kind of built into the cavern walls, which they later discovered is like they're like giant effigies and shown as figures. This place may have been some sort of shrine to Vismir, who's like one of the lost Nords of the North. And there's a strong link between giants and Jorga, and it's always it's potentially like a possible site of interest for the Arcanum back at Mount Minrock, like to send out a team here and see if they can find out any of their lost culture. So he notes that as a possible place. I suppose some possible links here for some dwarven history. But anyway, yeah, they follow what appears to be like a frozen stream that came from this cave system slash shrine and has like bled out into the lake. And they come across a waterfall, a frozen waterfall. They climb up it without much problem. They then come to a choice. They can either follow this frozen stream further forward, and that seems to bend to the left a bit, or there's a path immediately to the right that seems to go upwards slightly, almost like a staircase. They ultimately decide to follow the path to the right, and they ascend the staircase. Owners of the book will know what awaits them here. They emerge into a frozen over room. There's bones scattered everywhere, blood all over the walls. And in a pile of these bones, there's literally like heaps of these bone piles. There is completely encased in ice, at least above the waist, a frost giant skeleton. Of course, you can imagine what happens. The barbarian, Rayna, she approaches, and this giant skeleton begins coming to life, and thus begins the fight against a CR6 enemy. This is like, when I read this in the book, I was, holy hell, like, how the hell are they meant to deal with this? But thankfully, I did read more into it. The skeleton takes 2 rounds for it to come out of the ice anyway, so that's 2 rounds of like 3 characters damage that they can do. So they do a bit of damage. Stronus does manage to pull off a catapult spell, which is bludgeoning damage, so that does double to the skeleton, which I think it did like 30 damage in one hit, which for like a level 1 spell at level 2 is great. The skeleton, of course, comes to life, like breaks free from the tomb rather. It managed to fell Rayna again, and I think she fails another 2 death saves, and she becomes again so close to dying. They eventually like kill the skeleton, but they do all get quite injured. They do all pretty much use all of their resources. Stronus has no spells now. Rayna, I think, has 1 rage left. Mutiny used all her spells healing Rayna, and I don't think she has any of her like Ranger Slayer's Prey thing either. It was a tough fight, and a fight that really should have killed them all, but judging by from in the book. But I don't know why I decided to leave it in anyway. I thought it was fun, so I kind of just left this massive enemy in the game, and it kind of shows how dangerous things can be, I guess. But it was fun. It was fun for me. It's watching see them scared and fighting this impossible thing. But yeah. Anyway, they talk about resting. Long resting, like after defeating this thing, and I have to remind them of my rules on long resting inside hostile locations. And I'm sure you all probably have, you DMs out there probably have a similar thing where, it doesn't really make sense that they can just sleep for 8 hours in a dungeon, or it doesn't really make sense. So I say to them, like, this is my ruling is that, like, you have to make an area safe, otherwise there's no way that you can rest safely. Like, something is guaranteed to happen if you're not going to set up any sort of safety measures. So they think about doing that for a while. They thought about making an alarm spell, but then she realised, I don't have any spells. The ranger, that is, he doesn't have any spells. So they think about that for a while, and then I decide to just pick things up after they're just talking, stuck there for a while, and I trickle in the hearing of like some humming on the wind and this strange song that seems to have like this elderly lady cadence to it, timbre rather, which of course people of the book will know. This is just a hag waiting for them in the next room. With this, they decide to just march out basically, and almost immediately encounter this sea hag. Maud Chiselbone is the name. They stealth somewhat successfully to the threshold of threshold of this cave that she's in. Um, and they see four things in this room. One, of course, they see the hag, which they can only somewhat see as it's like backlit by the second thing that they see, which is this glowing wisp that flies above and behind her. The hag, I described it, has like ragged robes covering most of this strange creature's body, and then hair like covers its face, with like, you know, like the ring girl style thing. They see four bodies. This is the third thing they see. They see four bodies in various states of decay, like stuck to the wall, which they of course surmise are the lost fishermen, which is correct, they are. And the fourth thing is this large cauldron with like runes and sigils all around the outer lining, and this is what the hag is standing over and stirring, with these like really abnormally long arms with elbows that just point out to the sides. They like just hang out there for a while and just watch this thing. Usually gets ready to like fire a shot, but Maud, the hag, she just calls out to them, and they all hear this voice in their heads, and she like raises one bony and lanky arm rather, and like this big bulbous yellow eye peers out from underneath one of the hairs, and all the players keep going, oh, fucking shoot them, but Mutiny doesn't shoot. She kind of sits there, and like Maud keeps talking to them and invites them for a chat, noting that the last people to enter, basically it didn't go well for them, pointing towards the four dead fishermen, and she more or less just begins shuffling off into another chamber and just like beckoning them to come and follow her, and they all oblige. They all cautiously follow. Some of them check out the cauldron as they move from this chamber to the next, and of course it's got human bits floating in it, but I also tell them it does smell enticing. It does smell like really good grub that could be in this thing, and they all kind of, oh, that's strange, I don't really want to fancy eating human meat, but anyway. They didn't have time really to do any proper checks at that, you know, arcane checks or anything like that, so they kind of just noted that and then moved on. They followed Maud, and she enters another large cavern. This room would actually be once the hot spring and the central chamber of the Vsmir shrine. However, nowadays it's like a large frozen pond almost that is. If on a clear day, like the moonlight does shine through, and you can see like beneath the ice, and there is various like shrine-like things underneath the ice. Some like I described like some frost giant skeletons that are encased down there. There's various effigies all underneath the ice and like built into the walls, almost like a Michelangelo dome kind of style. Yeah, so this would have been like this central chamber where all this Vsmir worship was going on. Maud continues to shuffle and continues to keep enticing them, and she's just like laughing and in like the hag kind of way, and until eventually she stops. She misty steps up to like a throne-like altar on a frozen waterfall that leads further into the cliffside, and she turns to them and like peers out from them underneath her like robes, and she begins taunting them even more. She starts making a motion with her hands, and she looks like she's expecting something to happen. Nothing happens, and Stronus identifies, I'm sure a lot of you probably have now identified what she was trying to do, that she was trying to summon the frozen skeleton that they had already defeated, and like after he kind of realized this and told the others, she immediately becomes more angry. She missteps again, like, and this time appears in front of them, and she starts transforming into this strange bulbous fish-like creature with claws and an elongated face. I'll put an image on screen for what I imagine she looking like. This is a custom creature. It's a form of hag I've made, inspired from the Qualu Palak of Inuit legends and folklore. And yes, well, she basically roars in their face, and I end the session there. And that's it really. A somewhat eventful session, full of combat, not much in terms of story. I'm a bit worried for next session, I'm not going to lie, given that they're starting a fight with 0 resources, but I guess we will see what happens. There weren't much of a grander story things going on here. It's more or less just a, your bog standard session, dungeon run, that kind of thing. But I suppose afterwards, there is stuff in these caves. Like later, if they decided, or if they do decide to afterwards, if they survive killing this thing, to like explore the rest of the cave or the free caves outside, they will find various links to Georga, and there's an abandoned camp here they can find. There's like some journals with a mention for Vokun, which may get interesting if Shonas finds it and reads it. We might get a reaction out of him. But that's it, pretty much. That happened. So yeah. Anyway, yes. Session 3. This is the Cauldron Caves. Glad to have you all along for the journey, and we'll be seeing you next time.